welcome to Adeptus On Air, the show where we examine how individuals and companies make decisions that drive their business and personal success. Each week, we connect with notable professionals who pull back the curtain on the industries that Adeptus has been on the cutting edge of for the last 30 years, including music, sports, and entertainment, as well as new emerging markets. Welcome to our latest edition of Adeptus On Air, and today we have a special guest in Jeff Howell. He is a recruiting specialist, has a lot of unique experience that we're definitely going to dig into, and is also head of his company, College Sports Recruiting. So, Jeff, always like to kind of start from the beginning. If you can kind of tell me how you got into the recruiting space, I'm sure
Mhm.
you have a unique story with that, and just what was the genesis of it all?
Sure. Thanks for having me, by the way. It was great to be here. I really kind of fell into it um, by necessity. So, my oldest son, who is going to be a freshman at a D3 program in Illinois, um, we're part of a private Catholic school here in Michigan, and it's tough to get a lot of attention when you're playing eight man in rural Michigan. So Joe definitely wanted to move on to the next level. And also, just because of how life goes sometimes, we also needed to have the opportunity for him to earn some of his way in there. So we were looking for athletic scholarships and programs that could provide that. So his halfway through his sophomore year, um, I started to kind of look online to find information about what that process was like. And unfortunately, I didn't find a whole lot that was all in one place, right? So you have some of these agencies that you pay for and they help you with that process, and then you have um, other other recruiters who they're sole proprietors. This is what they do, and it's great. But they charge $1,000, or they have a monthly subscription fee, or stuff like that. Um, and just for an average upper middle class family like ours, it just felt like there wasn't a lot. The barrier to entry was pretty low, or it was pretty high, I mean. So I just found ways to do this myself. I was talking to Joe's high school football coach. Um, Started to do some research. I did find some information on NCSA that was cool. That kind of helped with the social media part of it. And then, in a past life, I did digital marketing and social media, so I had a lot of context to how to get exposure for Joe. So I helped him manage his Twitter account and started just following every single coach I possibly could, no matter where
Mhm.
it was. Any a D1 program, D2, NAIA, D3, JUCO, I just followed. If they said coach, recruiter, football, they were on my list. Um, And obviously, with some of the huddle highlights that he was getting, we put together a reel for him and pinned it and started just spreading, getting his name out there. Um, and then, and a variety of other things, sending out emails and doing research on programs, all the while, Joe trying to figure out where he wanted to go and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of did a lot of that concurrently, um, uh, researching programs on different college recruiting sites. NCSA is a big one that we used to just identify what D1, D2, D3 programs were in the region that Joe wanted to go to school at.
Mhm.
And so I would, look up those programs and research them, find their football website, find out their record. If they were, 0 and 10, Joe's not going to want to go there, right? So, not knocking them. I'm sure they're great coaches, but he wants to play and he wants to have a good experience winning. So we just kind of made a list of all those different things. And I found these coaches. I followed them on Twitter for him, and Joe did too, and did some interactions. Um, but throughout the whole process, I was realizing that I was gaining a lot of information, and I didn't want to just keep it to myself.
Yeah.
So I started coming up with this idea. Okay, well, how do I share it, right? Um, how do I monetize it? How do I get the word out there? So I had a couple of friends of mine who are still in the marketing space. I still kind of have my hand on the marketing space through public speaking gigs I do, and they suggested I try doing a course, an online course that people would pay for, but it would have all that information in one spot. And in addition to that, I came up with a ton of blog post content that I have scheduled up actually until middle of September at this point,
Wow.
using some AI to help me with the content and the generation of it, but mostly my own thoughts. Um, and wanted to have just a resource for parents who didn't want to go after these agencies and spend that money, who didn't necessarily have the connections with recruiters or the connections with sports recruiters that could help them, right? Um, and so I chose to empower these parents and their student athletes to kind of do this on their own. Takes a lot of time and takes a lot of effort. However, I think the rewards that you gain by doing it yourself
Uh-huh.
is a whole lot better because you're building those relationships and not relying on somebody else to build that relationship for you.
Yep.
So that was kind of the genesis of this idea of putting this business together. I've had some varying degrees of success, not a ton of exposure at this point. There's, websites take a little while to matriculate through the servers, and so there's a
Yep.
lot of propagation that still need to happen. But I've also been doing some good old-fashioned grassroots emails, just to
Well,
athletic directors of high schools in Michigan, and been getting some positive feedback. Obviously, a lot of them aren't in school yet until next week, so I'm hoping
yep.
I'm expecting that when they get to their office, they're going to see this email and I get some extra exposure that way. But I mean, honestly, it's a business, yes, but I'm more interested in making connections with parents and student athletes who are going to value the content
Exactly.
and who are
Yep.
going to take it, run with it, and I'm hoping to help empower them to be successful and get to the programs that they have worked so hard to get to, right?
Exactly. Exactly. No, it's very, very well explained and it's very much needed. As I mentioned to you off camera, I do some
Mhm.
work with, I mentor some high school kids down here in South Florida, and
Right,
recruiting can be a dizzying process. You don't
right,
know where to start, and then, you have the top athletes getting all the attention, and then you have good players that don't get as much,
right.
it's really very top heavy, from what I've seen. Something interesting that you mentioned just during the process. Did all this happen during the pandemic at any point? Like some of the stuff that you had with your son, was the recruiting process during the pandemic, or was it just in the last?
Just post pandemic.
Got you.
Um, so 2020, obviously, he actually took that sophomore year off of playing football
Uh-huh.
um, because of the pandemic, and so which actually was beneficial because we switched schools halfway through his sophomore year. But if he had played, he wouldn't have been able to play his junior year
Oh
just
yeah.
because of Michigan athletic rules. So it actually worked out great. So this was just post pandemic, but also, you're dealing with um, coaches and athletes who are still trying to navigate kind of how the world was at that point,
Yep.
and it was a mess, right? So you got people trying to pick up the pieces of just getting back to normal life, as well as trying to get the attention of programs, and it wasn't easy at all.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned CASA, I think, and some of the
NCSA, yeah.
NCSA, sorry, and some of the
Hmm.
bigger recruiting services that are national. What are some of the voids and the holes that you see with some of these huge national sites? Because I think it's a
Hmm.
natural inclination for parents to look there first.
Sure. I'm not knocking them at all, and I say in my course that I did utilize their free services, but it
Mhm.
wasn't in no way an endorsement of that program. You know, if you have the means to pay for it, but you don't have the time in your schedule, then obviously services like that are worthwhile. But one of the gaping holes that I find with utilizing services like that is not only are you investing a ton of money that you may not get a return on, um, you're not you're not getting as much personal attention with the end
Mhm.
program that you're headed to. So you have these recruiting services that kind of help do the footwork for you, make that initial connection, and that's fine. That's great. The relationship gets built ultimately, but there's something to that personal touch from the beginning, going
Mhm.
all the way through the process, right? A good example of this is one of the programs that Joe almost signed with was in Cincinnati. It was a D3 program in Cincinnati, and the offensive line coach there became really tight with Joe. And Joe almost got sick to his stomach having to tell him that he wasn't going to this program. He was going to go to the one in Illinois because they would text every day. They would talk about not just football, but life stuff. Like, how are you
Yeah.
doing in school? How are you managing post pandemic? How are you doing being a good big brother to your siblings? And how is that
Uh,
working out? And, he knew that he had transitioned to a new school. So how is that going? Gave him some tips of just trying to be a good leader in his program because he'd play football, basketball, and baseball. So he was getting good advice from this coach. So I don't think that we would have had that personal attention if we were utilizing a service to
correct.
make those
Correct.
connections because it seems much more transactional and much more sterile, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing. But when you're trying to do this yourself, do tell parents that there's something empowering about making that relationship from start to finish.
Yeah.
And there's something more natural and cathartic about when you go from first meeting to finally signing day and you have that relationship from then on. It's 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 a relief but also much more personal, I think.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. 100%. What are your thoughts on the transfer portal, which has been really hot over the last 3 years or so, three,
Yeah,
4 years? There's been a backlog because college eligibility got stopped for that, 1 year.
sure.
So, it seems like it's been a dominant force in college, particularly in college football.
Yeah, I mean, I think the transfer portal, NIL stuff, I mean, I don't want to. I'm not going to talk negatively about it because I think there are benefits to both of those things. Yeah, I think it provides the transfer portal does provide flexibility for
Yeah.
for um, for recruits to navigate to different programs if they don't feel like they're getting what they want out of the program they're in. But it's to the detriment of 1, 2, and 3-star recruits
Yeah.
because any any program in their right mind is going to try and go after a 4 and 5-star recruit
Yeah.
that's in the transfer portal. I mean, that's where their priority is, and so they would tend to look over an athlete that may be a better fit for their program, but they're going to go after the one that can make the big splash.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a similar situation in the free agency. It's in professional sports. Um, I don't mind it so much, but I think it has caused some athletes who may otherwise have gotten the spotlight to um, be put in the shadows, and I don't think it's fair to them necessarily, especially when you consider that you might have had an athlete that was going to an FCS,
Yeah.
former D1A program, would have been a 3-star, would have gotten a full ride, but then they're relegated to a D2 program because that 4 or 5-star won out. And then, similarly for D1 to D2 to D3, without having the opportunity to earn an athletic scholarship on a D3 level, then you're hoping that you're able to have good enough grades in order to get some academic money, which not, as you know, not every athlete is able or willing to do because they put so much focus on their athletic prowess. Um, so I believe that there is a space for it. I would like to see it maybe a little bit more regulated, which sounds really weird because the NCAA regulates everything at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think there is a need for some kind of um, or a different structure, maybe not quite regulation, but a different way of doing it that still allows the opportunity for these lower star recruits to still get the exposure that I think that they've worked their butts off for and that they do deserve.
Yeah, and just personal story from what I've seen is again just down here in South Florida. There are some college coaches that just firmly believe that it's best for them and their job security to take on a college player through the portal that may have a year or two of college football experience, as opposed to giving a 18-year-old a scholarship who may not transition well, maybe not even on the field, just in college life. You know, some
Right,
kids go from high school to college and don't really know how to transition and get their grades and time management and all those kind of things.
right.
So to be able to take a college player who maybe have a year or two of experience, even if they didn't play a lot, they kind of know what college football is about. There's some coaches. It's like, look, I don't want to get fired. I can't afford to lose five, six, 7 games this year. You know,
Right.
I'll take on 3 or 4 portal players versus
Hmm.
3 or 4 scholarships. Um, it's a business and it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough with that.
Which therein lies the problem. Sometimes you have the university athletic directors who care more about ticket sales and exposure
Hmm.
on on ESPN rather than giving a Tom Brady a shot, for instance, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
that kind of story of Tom Brady isn't. I mean, obviously it's a rare story,
yeah,
but I don't think it'll happen again, right? Because of things like the transfer portal and things like
yeah.
NIL, where an average quarterback really
Hmm.
going in at Michigan, it's just it again. Yes, college football is an absolute business from D1 all the way to NAIA. That's just what it is. Um, it's just I think there's an opportunity to find a different way of managing that.
Yeah. You briefly mentioned NIL. Just expand. What are your thoughts on the NIL landscape? And we see it a lot from the tax side.
Yeah.
At Adeptus. Just curious from what you've seen so far in the recruiting landscape.
So I think the NIL is a benefit as well as long as it's managed properly with the college and the state and the student itself. I think the student should be if they're going to have NIL money, having a support system at the university that kind of helps them um, manage those monies.
Hmm.
Especially since financial planning isn't something that's taught in high school much anymore. There's an opportunity I think for that. I think the NIL is a good compromise between paying players and then giving them the opportunity to earn an income while they're playing. The being able to have sign uh, memorabilia for them or have endorsement deals and things like that. I don't think that's a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
Any player is eligible for that, which I think is great. D1 all the way to D3, linemen, third string linemen to the star quarterback and running back and wide receiver. Like I like that it's everybody is given the same opportunity to have an NIL. Um, it's and I don't think it's been as negative to the sport as maybe the transfer portal.
Mm.
Um, as with anything, too much excess I think is a negative thing, right? So you get some of these players who are making god awful amounts of money, but again, it's a business, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think the NCAA was smart to defer to state laws,
Yeah.
which I think is great, and I think this most of the state legislators have had kind of their head on a swivel and have come up with some decent stopgaps to kind of allow not make it easy for extortion or embezzlement or things that will negatively affect the player. Um, but I still think the jury's out on how effective it is and whether or not it affects the sport negatively or positively.
Yeah.
All I know is that I'm for it just because these players have really worked their tails off
Yeah.
through all the way from Pee Wee football through
Yeah.
travel ball to AAU and even the 13 12 12 13 14U baseball tournaments during the summer travel ball, like they've worked that and the parents have sacrificed, and I think that um, giving the student the opportunity to earn something, whether or not they want to kick it back maybe to their parents or their schools, their high schools, is up to them. But at least giving them that opportunity to make a living and have something to kind of fall back on if maybe they don't get drafted professionally or they go into the workforce. They'll have something in place that can kind of help them get started with their
And some,
life.
very good points there. And something that we've seen here at Adeptus from a tax perspective is the
Hmm,
universities are not doing a good enough job with tax education. And I know
that's true.
financial, planning and literacy, that's important as well. But I really haven't seen much at all tax education um,
Right.
from the universities. And there's some cases where the players don't even know, like, okay, we got 1099 money versus W-2 money, so they didn't
Right.
take anything out, and now they're wondering why they owe taxes when nothing was
Right.
taken out before. And
Yeah.
it's not the fault of the athletes.
No.
I mean, a lot of times these are 19, 20, 21 year old, young men and women, and
Yeah.
they're getting this money is from a collective or what have you, and
Hmm.
there's really no education of what that means and what needs to be done and how to be responsible with it. So I would say if any universities are watching this podcast, please, educate the athletes just like train them hard in football and in the
Hmm.
classroom and things like that. Educate them on taxes and important things that come with getting these lump sums.
Yeah, that's a great point because actually we had this conversation with Joe because he's got this summer job
Mm-hmm,
and he got a bonus for the amount of hours he worked this summer and he was all excited and
mm-hmm,
um, and then he was looking at his pay stub and he's just like, what is all this? This is FICO and Social Security and all this. And he's smart enough, and we've been diligent enough to kind of teach him how to budget and know what to expect. But he when he's looking at the comparatively small amount of money that he's earned, and then realizing that once he graduates college, he's going to have adult money.
mm-hmm.
And when he's looking at the percentages of how much he pays in taxes now versus what he could potentially have to pay when he gets out. It's just he kind of woke him up a little bit, and so I totally 100% agree with you that because all this money is um, just given as either a 1099, most of it,
Yep.
yeah, definitely they need to understand that okay, come April, they owe the government some of this money.
Yep, exactly. And yeah, it's not enough. Maybe the universities are trying to take a hands-off approach, with it, but I think education should always be hands-on.
Sure,
So yes,
that's
that's
very
a tough
true.
spot. Personal story with me, I have a 5 and 6 year old. They're fairly, they're good athletes.
Hmm.
I played high school football, a little bit of college intramural sports, basketball,
Yeah,
flag football, stuff like that. Um, how does a parent like myself and many others out there that may have a, youth sports, Pee type age,
sure.
boy or girl, how do they balance, how do I say this? How do they balance making sure they're involved in athletics, but not pushing them too hard?
Right,
So my kids like chasing lizards and climbing trees and things like that. But if
right,
I take them out to do soccer drills, they're like, I'd rather chase squirrels. That's
right,
let so we let our kids be kids. So how do you balance that at such an early age when things are so competitive out there?
right. It's funny you mention this because my 8-year old, my youngest, um, the 8-year-old boy who's 8 years old and he's almost 5 feet tall. He's huge.
Wow.
Had his first tackle football camp last night, and he obviously looks up to his big brother Joe, right? And he's like, I want to play football. I want to play basketball. And we've noticed early, and even Joe has worked with him too a little bit, but he's got spectacular hand-eye coordination.
Mm,
He's
that's
he's
awesome.
able to he's able to dribble the basketball without looking down at 7 and 8 years
Wow.
old. So he's got the talent, right? And he's obviously a big, stocky kid. So he wanted to play quarterback, and we're like, no, you're gonna be a lineman. You're gonna be a lineman because you're just big and stocky, and that's just how it is. Um, but so he'll want to go out, and we've showed him, certain skills on the offensive line or defensive line, and Joe's kind of worked with him, and yesterday or the past couple of weeks before this first camp, we'd take him out in the yard and he would play around. And then, but we made it, at least I did, I made it an opportunity to share some life lessons with him, right? So he he would fool around and he would get into a stance and then he'd explode out of it and get his arms out and then he'd fall right over, right? Because he's fun. He was just playing around because the grass was felt good to him and he fell down on the ground and he laughed and stuff and that's great. But I use it as an opportunity to share with him, like, look, your teammates are going to expect you to hold your ground, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But even more importantly, when somebody wants to push you around, both emotionally or physically, you've got to stand your ground and not fall down. Your team, your people around you, your friends, your family are expecting you or hoping for that you will stand your ground and not fall down. You know, set
good
your
point.
feet and hold your ground and don't fall down. Do whatever you do. And if you do fall down, you get yourself right back up and
Yep,
follow the play or follow life, follow where the next thing's taking you, right?
yep,
And so we always find those little opportunities to kind of help him see a life lesson in the sports part of it, right? And then there are just times where he'll be like, I want to go practice. It's like, yesterday or this afternoon. No, it was yesterday. So his camp was 2 days ago. So last night, we're out in the front yard. He's got his helmet on, he's got the pads on, and he wants to, practice his firing drills on the offensive line. And so we worked with him for a little bit, and he was there for a half an hour, and that's all he did, right? It wasn't goofing around. He was taking it serious. So there is that balance, like, but I will never, no matter how tired I am, and this is a lesson I learned from Joe because when Joe was 10 years ago, Joe was 8.
good night.
There were times that I didn't do the best thing as a father, and when he would say I want to play catch, I would be like, I'm too tired. I don't want to go out. But over time, because we have 4 children, and I just have learned that okay, no matter how tired I am, if Judah wants to play catch, or if Judah wants me to take him down to the park a couple blocks down to shoot hoops, I'm going to go take him down to the park. I'm going to and shoot hoops with him because
Right.
I missed out on some of that with Joe. And with Joe, it's like yesterday he was learning how to ride his bike without training wheels, and tomorrow I'm taking him to college. Right?
Oh,
The
wow,
the
wow,
the time goes by so fast. So
wow.
I'm going to take every opportunity I can to be with Judah and our other two, the 2 girls, and just engage with them. But to your question about, how do you kind of work sports into just their normal play? It's like you just let him, right? I know
Yeah,
sometimes you might want to be like, I want you to get this lesson. I want you to get this skill set down. I want you to get this dribbling drill down. I want you to get, you know, this swing down. I want you to get, the soccer footwork down. I want you to,
good.
whatever it might be, your backhand on your tennis swing down. I want you to get all of this down. But if they just want to go chase lizards, let them
Mhm.
chase lizards because there'll be a time that they'll be like, "Hey, let's go work on my backhand, Dad," or "Hey, let's go work on my foul shooting, Dad," or "Hey, let's throw the football around because I need to practice my form." Like if you say, "Hey, I want to go out and I want to teach you X, Y, Z," and they're not wanting to, that's fine. But they'll remember that you're willing to take them out and let them play, and then they'll ask you at some point down the road, "Hey, can you teach me that thing you wanted to teach me?"
Oh, okay. No, that's really really good advice. Really good advice with that. My son is pretty good at soccer, has good footwork and everything.
Yeah,
But when it's off season for him, he plays from October to March, and then during the off season, he doesn't want to go out and practice drills or anything, but he loves going
yeah,
out, climbing trees, and he's 6 years old.
sure.
So we let him do that with his sister.
There'll,
Um,
there'll be there'll be time for him to take it seriously. There'll be time for him to do all that.
yeah,
You know.
no, that's good advice for myself and other parents of young children out there.
hmm
Jeff, do you work on recruiting with other sports outside of football, or is that most of your experience with football?
So my experience has been football, but I've learned just by research and talking to other parents that a lot of the same skills or a lot of the same activities are common across most sports, right? Lacrosse, girls and boys basketball, um, baseball. I found baseball is a little bit of a different animal. Just because you got not just college programs, but you got pro programs kind of thrown into that
That's
too.
right.
But I found with most sports, most high school and that translate into college sports, a majority of the skills that I learned will translate.
Gotcha.
The social media skills, the acquiring the the program connections, all of that is pretty common no matter what sport it is.
Yeah. No, so how important is or how important are highlights um, versus coaches getting to know the character or the
Mhm.
personality? How do you weigh them? Which more is more important? You know.
So I found, and this has been our experience with a few D2 and a couple of D1 programs that Joe was being recruited at. Um, they wanted the highlight first, and then
Okay.
they would just, if they were super interested, they would call the coach up. They would call the school administrator up and be, hey, tell me about this kid. Tell me about this guy. Um, that's why you see most coaching staff of a program, they're all recruiting. They're all on the phone, like during downtime. They're always just kind of picking up the phone and talking to a school administrator to get that kind of idea of their character. Um, so with a highlight reel, at least this is again just for football and basketball, just with my experience. Um, there's a tendency to kind of embellish the video by adding a bunch of music and all this extra graphics. They don't want to
Uh-huh.
see that. They want to see, especially for football, for instance, they want you to highlight the player before the play, let the play run, and then go on to the next play
Gotcha.
for your highlights. So
Yep.
none of the extra embellishments because they don't care. They just want to see the skill, right?
Yep.
Basketball, similar situation. So, but when it comes to character, if they're super interested, they're going to get your information of what school you're at. They're going to call, they're going to talk to whoever. And then that's when they invite you for a visit. That's when they get to know you, they get to talk to you, they get to sit you down in the coach's room, and they just talk about a variety of things, right? Um, we did probably, I know, a dozen official visits,
Wow.
um, and it was always kind of about, the coaches would ask about how your grades, um, how are you yeah, how are your grades? What's your favorite subject? Um, what do you like most about your program? Um, how involved in leadership of the program are you? They just kind of ask you those leading questions to get the athlete to just kind of talk about how they react to certain situations and how involved they are in a variety of different things. They'll ask you about extracurricular activities, church programs or, local 4-H or community events that they're a part of. They want to kind of get to see how involved they are in the community, right? All of that
Yep.
just comes through asking questions. And occasionally, actually not occasionally, about 50-50 during Twitter DMs, sometimes a coach would ask, hey, what do you do outside of school? Right? Do you have a
Mm,
job? Right? Those are all leading character questions that kind of gives them a much wider picture of what the student's involved in, right? If the student just says, oh, I go work out all the time and I go to school and I go to practice and I go play games and then I'm studying film, great, right? If you're a 5-star athlete, yeah, that's what you're going to do, right? And they know that. But if you're a D3 program looking at a D2, a 2-star, 1-star, 3-star athlete, they want to know what else you bring to the table, right? What kind of character
yeah.
decisions are they making? What kind of leadership qualities do they have? And all that is just sort of through asking leading questions. And if you're going to balance the two, I think the highlight reel is what kind of hooks the program, and
Okay.
then they're going to take care of asking the right questions to build a character profile.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense with that, and also just keeping that highlight real clean,
Yes.
circle, and then highlight because I see a lot of music and all this
Well, I
different
mean,
stuff.
that's great for like, if you want to pin the tweet, to your profile and just have, hey, this was great and have all the graphics and all the extra stuff, cool, that's fine. But a reel or a highlight reel that you have in your profile on your Twitter page, and then with the one that you send out, now that's you got to make that clean.
Do you find coaches check social media as a character gauge?
Yes, absolutely they do. Um, so if you post a bunch of political stuff, or if you post a bunch of party stuff, or you post a bunch of things that are kind of meaningless, that kind of speaks to kind of the things that you're involved in, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you still got to be you, right? You got to be you. But I think those are things where like what Snapchats are for, so you can talk to your friends that way, or you know, maybe a hidden Instagram account, right, that you just have with your friends. Sure, have at it. But
Yeah,
anything that's public, you have a Twitter or a Threads account and a public Instagram page and your Facebook page, and you're trying to get involved into a college athletic program, you need to make it pretty clear that you're not into some stuff that they don't want to be a part of.
yeah, yeah. That's a good point. And we tell the kids we mentor all the time, keep your social media clean because college coaches are watching.
Yeah,
And I mean, in some ways they're kind of looking for reasons to X you out, you know, and
they are. They absolutely are. Because
that could be
they're
one.
overwhelmed. They have a whole list of kids.
Yep, exactly. And that could be one of them. You mentioned official visits, just for our audience that don't know or may have
Hmm.
kids that are up and coming. Can you just explain the difference between official visits, unofficial visits,
Sure.
offers, soft offers?
Yep.
It can get kind of confusing too.
It, yeah, it is. And I don't really have a huge clear picture on it either. But so an official offer is going to be, an official visit is going to be, hey, when they say, um, we want you to come down, go talk to admissions. We'll set up a timer schedule. You'll get a tour. You'll come meet with us. Either we'll go through some film, or we'll give you a tour, or we'll kind of expose you to our program and to our education um, campus. That's kind of an official visit where they're like, hey, we want you to come and do this. An unofficial would be like, hey, we got a home game this weekend. I can get you free tickets. Come a little early. We'll talk. We'll sit down. We'll get to know you a little bit more. That's sort of a unofficial. Hey, we invited you. We're giving you tickets to the game, but it's not. You're not meeting with anybody other than us, right? We're just kind of getting to know you a little bit. And those are kind of the first interactions that we had. We got a bunch of game invites, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then he had a soft offer where it was like, hey, we want to offer you a roster spot, right? That doesn't mean that you are technically going to be on the team. It's just like, hey, if you choose to come to this college or this university, we got a place for you. And so they'll make up this really cool graphic for you, and have the offered on it and the kid's name. And like Joe's first offer was from a local college here, Alma College. Had no intention of going there because it's 15 minutes away. He doesn't want to be that close to home. And I don't blame him. Like, get out, just go do something, go be you. Um,
Yeah,
but that was a soft offer. It was like, hey, we give you this graphic. We're giving you a roster spot. If you want to come here, there's a spot for you here. And then the official offer, we had a few of those from a couple of NAIA schools, a bunch of D3 schools, a couple of D2 programs, where they send you a letter. They say, hey, we saw that you were accepted for admissions. We like you. We want you to be a part of our program. Here's an official letter from the coach. Like, we want
yeah,
you as part of our program. And so that's more of an official. I know there's a lot more nuances than that, but as easy as I can explain it quickly, that's kind of what the
yeah.
difference is for those official visit, unofficial visit, soft offer, official offer.
Yeah, and that's a good explanation to the parents who may see some of these things for the first time.
Hmm.
If they have a high school sophomore or something like that, they kind of know the difference. I
And
think
and
that's
one thing to note with those first offers, those first offers are gold because then you start posting that everywhere.
mm,
And if you have other coaches and other programs that are following you and they see that you've gotten an offer, that means a lot, the world to them, because then those programs know, okay, this program is willing to take a chance on this kid. Maybe he deserves a closer look. And
yeah,
so we worked really hard to get that first offer, and then almost like the next 3 or 4 months, it was offer, soft offer, 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 offer.
wow,
And so it just kind of just started coming. So you work really hard for that first one, and then you post the heck out of that first one,
yeah.
and then that just, like I said, that just shows to the other programs that this athlete might be worth taking a closer look at.
Yeah, that's a great tip because it can also be almost be used as a marketing tool, to get that first one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's an awesome tip. I never thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense. Where do you see? I know you said you had some early successes, and it's going to take some time, but where do you see college sports recruiting in 3 to 5 years? What's your plan, midterm, long term?
Sure. So I'm emailing the heck out of as many local, Michigan athletic directors, and I'm moving on to other states that are attached to us. Um, With the 3 to 5 years, I think that kind of depending on how the transfer portal goes and depending on how the student loan industry goes. I mean, there's a lot of factors that are going to be involved in this, but I think my hope is that more and more parents will be willing, and more student athletes will be willing to take on a lot of this work themselves to kind of empower themselves through maybe they buy my course, maybe they go to a seminar I do, whatever. But regardless of how they get that empowerment, to navigate this themselves, because this was a really good bonding time with my kid, right? The
Yeah,
whole
yeah,
process of doing this was great, and it was tiring and it was exhausting and it was sometimes frustrating and demoralizing sometimes when you didn't get a connection for 3 weeks. But I'm hoping within the next 3 to 5 years, more and more parents and student athletes will come to understand that it's worthwhile to
yeah.
do the work and do the footwork of getting the attention of different programs. And I'm just kind of hoping that, maybe down the road I get in front of 500, 1,000, couple thousand parents and student athletes, just to let them know that you can do this, and this is something that is well within your grasp of taking on, and you have the skills to make it happen, to get in front of these programs, and you never know which program is going to get your attention, or the attention you're going to, or what program you're going to get the attention of, because the one that Joe's going to didn't even hit our radar until January,
Wow, wow.
right? So we were going to all these different programs, and they just happened to be on the way. We were going to Minneapolis, and they just happened to be on the way. So we're like, oh, we'll just stop by for an official visit. We were there for 6 hours,
Wow,
right?
wow.
And then we went to two other programs, and we were going to go to three in Minnesota. We only went to two of them
Mm,
because it was like, no, Lake Forest is the place. So
wow.
you never know, but it doesn't happen without the hard work. But the parents and the student athletes can do it, and I hope to empower as many as I can to let them know that this is worthwhile and you guys can do this.
Wow, it's a great story and a great message, Jeff. And let us know where, let the audience know where can we find you? Where can we find the business on
Sure.
social media, all your channels?
So you want to go to Jeff Howell, JEFFHOWELL .me, and that's my website. Um, and from there, you can get to my college recruiting Twitter account, my college recruiting Instagram account. From there, you can sign up to download a free ebook that kind of gives you just a high level overview of some of the tips we talked about. You can sign up to take the course if you choose to. It's only 2 hours long, and once you sign up for it, it's yours indefinitely, so you can go back to it as many times as you want to, and stop the video and go back and all that kind of stuff. Um, I also do in-person seminars too, so I can come into colleges or colleges or high schools or any organizations and come do a seminar to kind of talk to people about the tips and tricks and the skills that you need in order to get in front of college programs. But all of that is you can find on that jeffhowell.me. All the social media links are there, and my email's on there too. And so let's just to connect with as many people as I possibly can.
That's awesome, and we'll put all those in the show notes as well,
Cool.
so people that listen to Adeptus on their podcast can see. And Jeff, just awesome story, and just as a father, my kids are much younger, 6 and 5, so I get the journey and everything that you went through, and the feelings that come with that, and the joy
Hmm.
that came with all the hard work and the mission completed together, with you and your son. And then to even spin it into a business, that's next level, and just a great story all around, Jeff. So thank you for your time, and being on the podcast, and just great interview. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus on Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. If you have a question related to this episode or have a request for what you would like to hear, please email us at marketing@adeptuscpas.com. You can also find us at adeptuscpas.com online or follow us at Adeptus on social media. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.